Help support Name Explain by liking this video, leaving a comment and subscribing to the channel.
So there I was building a cupboard. It had a really nice designer and it was a Christmas present, so I needed to wrap it too. However, I wasn't paying too much attention and knocked my thumb with the hammer while building it. It's safe to say I felt pretty dumb when I hit my thumb while making this cupboard. Now that didn't sound quite right, did it? And if you were looking at that paragraph on a piece of paper, it might be hard to figure out what exactly I did wrong. I mean, you can see I didn't spell any of the words wrong and I pronounced every letter there. However, that's the problem in this instance. I pronounced every letter. I've said this before on the channel, I'll say it again. Language is weird and really stupid, but it's this weird stupid stuff that I love so much about language. One of the first things we do when we start studying language as children is to understand the sounds each letter makes, and then from there we put those sounds together to create words and sentences and so on. However, sometimes these rules of language that are ingrained into us at a young age are completely thrown out the window, and that's with the silent letters that grace the English language. It's been said that English spelling is haunted by the little ghosts of silent letters, and that is such a cute and fitting way to describe these silent letters. And haunted by silent letters it most certainly is. It's actually thought that 2/3 of the words of the English language contain silent letters, which is way more than I ever thought it would be. But in the moment of writing this script, I'm starting to realise way more silent letters than I normally would, and I think this is because some silent letters are so ingrained into our vocabulary that we don't really pick up on them anymore. When we think of silent letters, the obvious silent K's and G's at the start of words like knock and gnome come to mind, and the silent B's at the ends of words like thumb too. However, these aren't the only instances of silent letters. Silent letters can even fit sneakily into the middle of words. In fact, here in the English language we can find examples of pretty much every letter being silent in a word. Well, like I said, almost every letter, but we'll talk about the odd ones out in a bit. And if you didn't believe me, well, here's an example of pretty much every letter being silent in a word, which might sound really dull, but like I said, perhaps some of these examples will make you realise just how often silent letters pop up without you realising. We get a silent A in critically, a silent B in bomb, a silent C in ascend, a silent D in hedge, a silent G in gnarly, a silent H in chrome, a silent I in parliament, a silent K in knife, a silent L in folk, a silent M in mnemonic, a silent N in column, a silent O in kernel, a silent P in psychic, a silent Q in lacquer, a silent R in iron, a silent S in island, a silent T in castle, a silent U in guard, a silent W in wreck, a silent X in foe, and a silent Z in rendezvous. So who is still here after just listening to me list off some words? If so, great. Happy to see that kept you engaged. And like I said, maybe some of those caught you off guard with their silent words. In fact, a word I just said is a prime example for myself. Guard. I don't think I've ever noticed that the U in guard is silent. I just write the word with the U in it without ever thinking about it. But maybe that's just me. Though you may have noticed not every letter can be silent. It seems that V and Y aren't ever silent here in English. Though I might be wrong, so let me know if you can think of any down below. Then we also have E, F and J, which are kind of odd ones. I read that a word with a silent F in it is halfpenny, which in British was pronounced as haypenny, though as a Brit myself I've never heard this pronunciation. And for J, apparently hallelujah contains a silent J, but I see that more as a soft J than it being silent, as if you took the J out the word it wouldn't be pronounced the same, hallelujah. But then again, this is something we're going to talk about later. And as for E, well, apparently there's a plethora of silent E words, primarily 4-letter words that end with E like cave and love. But am I just being stupid, or are these not silent? Like, they shape the words and would sound different without the E at the end. Like, apparently fate has a silent E, but without the E it wouldn't be pronounced as fate, it would be pronounced as fat. The reason we have this is because the E in words like this is being used as something called a diacritic letter, which means while they aren't pronounced, they change the pronunciation of another syllable. So while the E itself doesn't make its usual eh sound, it's still creating a sound. So I guess yes, I am just being stupid. However, it's not just single letter sounds that can be silent. Digraphs are capable of being completely silent in words too. Digraphs are when two letters come together to create one sound, like with TH making the th sound and CH making the ch sound. I only go over this not because I presume you guys wouldn't know them, but because I'd forgotten what these things were called. It's been a while since I've actually been in an English class. But yes, despite the fact these digraphs exist to help create sounds the usual 26 letters can't muster up, sometimes we put them in words only to not pronounce them, like the silent TH in asthma, or the silent GH in daughter. Also, at first I thought to myself, wait, is GH always silent? But then I remembered words like laughter and draft where it makes a f sound. And of course, here on Name Explain we can't not talk about names with silent letters in them. Isla contained a silent S, Margot contained a silent T, and Sarah contained a silent H. In fact, it seems H is quite a common letter to be silent in names, with the likes of Megan, Chloe, and the second H of Hannah. It's not only girls' names that get the silent treatment, however. Boys' names like Hugh and Malcolm have a silent G and L respectively. And it's not just proper nouns or people that can have silent letters. Normal nouns we have covered earlier like garden, knife, and gnome have silent letters in them too. Even some country names have silent letters in them too. And you know how much we love country names here on Name Explain. The H is silent in the names of the nations of Bhutan, Ghana, Thailand, Liechtenstein, just to name a few. All this silent letter talk got me thinking, what is the word with the most silent letters in it? It seems the popular answer is Q, as in the thing you do before buying something or going on a roller coaster. It could be argued that 4 of the 5 letters that make up the word are silent, as the word could simply be rendered as just the letter Q, in the same way A can be a letter and a word. However, it's also argued that some English place names take the cake for some of the most silent letter filled words. Just one example is the English name of Fairshore, which is spelt like this, which is just crazy. Though, when it comes to these crazy English names, I have to ask myself, are these really silent letters, or are they just letters being pronounced in a somewhat unconventional way? To me, I feel something only really counts as a silent letter if you took it out of the word and the word would still make sense, like knock in example. If you remove the K, the word could still be read as knock. However, with a name like this, if you remove all the letters that sounds aren't represented when you say it, you don't end up with a word that looks more like the way it sounds. Though this brings us nicely to the various kinds of silent letters. Author of A Survey of English Spelling, Edward Carney, did a breakdown of the various kinds of silent letters and placed them into 2 different groups, with one of those groups breaking down into a further 2 subgroups. These 2 groups are auxiliary letters and dummy letters, and dummy letters break up into the subgroups of inert letters and empty letters. Man, it's crazy how much we can talk about something that doesn't even make a sound. Edward Carney explained that auxiliary letters are the kinds of letters that don't make a sound as they are being used along with another letter to make a completely different sound. It seems that auxiliary letters are his names of a specific letter that goes into the making of the aforementioned digraphs like TH and CH. So a word like thing could be considered to have 2 silent auxiliary letters, as even though the T and the H are making a sound, they're making one singular sound together, and T's usual t sound and H's usual her sound aren't present in any way. Auxiliary letters are kind of both silent and not silent at the same time. Like I've said, language is weird. Dummy letters, on the other hand, are the more traditional kind of silent letter we've been talking about. But like I said, they break up into 2 subgroups of inert letters and empty letters. To start with, inert letters. These are the kinds of silent letters that are sometimes silent and sometimes aren't, depending on the word class the word is being used in. That might sound really confusing, and that's probably my fault for explaining it bad. But once you see an example, it will make way more sense. The best example I found is with resign and resignation. It's the same word but in verb and noun form respectively. As a verb, the G in resign is silent, while as the noun resignation, the G is not silent. And finally, with empty letters. These are silent letters that are always silent, like many of the ones we've already come across. Take your gnomes and your knocks. All this really makes you wonder, why do we even have silent letters anyway? And this all seems to stem from the messy history of the English language. English is a language that's taken and borrowed from all kinds of different languages. German had a huge influence on English and is to thank for many of our silent letters. The best example of this is with the word night, with its silent K at the start and GH in the middle. The word night in English came from the German Knecht, which means servant, and this word is pronounced with no silent letters at all. And when it was adapted into English, the K stuck around. Originally it was pronounced Knigehit, but over time the modern pronunciation took over, with that old spelling still remaining. Other words we borrowed are tsunami and psychology from Japanese and Greek respectively. In English, we don't start words with these clusters of consonants, so when we took these words into our own language, we simply kept the spelling but didn't bother pronouncing the first letters. A big factor would also have been the printing press being invented. This was a German invention, so a lot of printers would have been German themselves. This combined with the fact that at this time spelling wasn't standardized meant that all kinds of letters made their way into the English language, and have stuck around to this day as the silent letters that haunt our language. Anyway, hundreds of years have passed since the invention of the printing press, yet our language is still littered with these silent letters. So the question is, should we get rid of them? Well, in some instances we have. We've looked into the differences between British and American English in a previous video, and we saw there when Noah Webster was creating his American Dictionary of the English Language, he removed and changed letters that he felt were unnecessary in words. This of course led to a removal of many of these silent letters, like how the U and E were removed from the end of catalogue for Americans, while here in the UK these 2 letters have stuck around. Though, should we go further than that? There have been arguments made to remove the E at the end of words that don't really seem to need them. Take the likes of bottle, it could be argued that the E isn't needed to figure out the word, but just bottle as a word seems really unfinished. Though maybe that's just me being so used to seeing the word bottle with an E on the end. And sometimes while silent letters serve no purpose for pronunciation, they can serve the purpose of letting us know that two words that sound similar have different meanings. Take COPSE and COPSE. The first means a group of trees and the second means a group of police officers. It could be hard to figure out what word was being used in a sentence if it weren't for that silent E. So sometimes silent letters can serve more of a purpose than we may think. If you happen to be learning English, then here are a few more pointers on how to spot if a letter is going to be silent. B will always be silent if there's an M before it or a T after it, like we see with num and det. D is silent if it's followed by a J, like with adjacent. G is always silent if followed by an M or N, like with phlegm or sign. H is always silent if it's followed by a G with ghost or aghast. And of course K is always silent if it's followed by an N, like with knock and kneel and knob. Wait, can I say knob? If this video gets demonetized, we know why. This is just a little taster to help you out, but please, if you're learning English, don't use solely my videos to help you out. You can see from the comments section that I have a fairly poor grasp on this language I call my own. And yes, this video has really only been about the English language and its silent letters. And as you can see, we have talked about silent letters for way too long now, but I would love to hear if silent letters have a presence in your language. I did a tiny bit of research on this and it seems they're quite common in French. And I also read about the F character, which is used in Icelandic and Faroese. However, in Faroese is actually called an ed and it doesn't actually have a sound connected to it, making it a silent letter pretty much 100% of the time it's used. If someone could explain this to me in more detail, that would be awesome. I really hope you guys have learned a thing or two from this video. Now, I would love to learn a thing or two from you guys. Anyway, I better get back to knocking together that cupboard. Thank you to all my patrons who support Name Explain on a monthly basis. Name Explain depends on small monthly donations from fans like you to help keep the channel running. Just a small amount of $2 a month helps in a huge way, grants you patron exclusive Name Explain extras, and gets your name here with all these awesome people. Thank you. Hello all and thank you so much for reaching the end of the video. Stick around and check out another video and subscribe to stay up to date on all things Name Explain. You can follow myself on Twitter at NameExplainYT. Follow me there and tweet the name Ellen at me so I know you came from this message. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and once again thank you all so much.